れでは皆様、本日はお忙しいところ、一般社団法人アショカジャパン主催、地雷禁止のムーブメントを作った男、ジェリー・ホワイト氏講演会にご参加いただきまして誠にありがとうございます。本日の司会進行役を務めさせていただきます一般社団法人アショカジャパンの中川と申します。よろしくお願い申し上げます。講演開始に先立ちまして会場のご案内をいたします。お手洗いは会場を出て左手に曲がったところにございます。本講演会場および館内は全面禁煙となっております。喫煙される方は屋外の喫煙所をご利用ください。ご協力のほどよろしくお願いいたします。また会場では携帯電話の電源をオフまたはマナーモードに切り替えてくださいますようお願い申し上げます。本日の配布資料の確認を行います。本日の講演会の式次第、ジェリー・ホワイト講演会のチラシ、アショカジャパンアンニュアルレポート以上の3組です。またアンケートは講演会終了時までに受付にご提出のほどお願いいたします。また本日の講演会の様子はアショカジャパンと報道関係者によって撮影・録音いたしております。あらかじめご理解ご了承くださいませ。それでは皆様大変お待たせいたしました。ただいまより地雷禁止のムーブメントを作った男、ジェリー・ホワイト講演会を始めさせていただきます。はじめに本日の講演会主催のアショカジャパン代表渡辺よりご挨拶いたします。
皆様こんにちは。今日はわざわざお運びくださってありがとうございます。アショカについて知ってらっしゃる方いらっしゃいますか？3分の2ぐらいの方がいらっしゃる。でその3分の1の方にちょっと説明しますけれども、アショカというのは、世界は自分が変えることができるということを信じている人の90カ国にわたるネットワークです。で信じているだけではなくて、その信念に基づいて行動して、その行動が計測可能な成果を出しているという特徴があります。で政治的なリーダーですと、その国とか町の利権を守らなくてはならないですから、例えばアメリカファーストとかなんとかファーストとか言いますよね。で私たちは人類ファーストなんです。そういう国境とか差異は超えて人間のためのイノベーション、それに取り組んでいる団体と思ってくだされば近いと思います。で世界90カ国で、最初の1980年の発足以来、目に見える問題、表面に出ている、子どもの貧困とか、例えば貧しいシングルマザーの状況とかいろいろありますよね。でそういう問題の応急措置を提供するプログラムとか、取り組みではなくて、その症状ですね、体でいうと症状を生み出しているそもそもの原因を突き止めて、社会変革、新しい社会システムを作る人で、それが模倣可能であることによって世界中に広がる可能性をはらんでいるということで、そういう人たちのネットワークです。でそういう人たちを見つけ出して、アショカフェローという名前で、カテゴリーを作っております。でそのアショカフェローは今90カ国に約3300人おります。でその中でも本当のトップの 1、2% の人を上級アショカフェロー、シニアフェローと呼んでいます。そういうカテゴリーなんですね。でそれはスケールが巨大だっていうことです。巨大な変革を成し遂げる。で今日のスピーカーであるジェリー・ホワイトはその上級アショカフェローの一人です。ではジェリー・ホワイトを紹介させていただこうと思います。ジェリー、まだ
ここでジェリー・ホワイト氏の経歴をご紹介いたします。ホワイト氏は地雷禁止の国際的なキャンペーンを先導し、国連障害者の権利条約、クラスター爆弾禁止条約、対人地雷禁止条約の締結に貢献しました。 その貢献に対し、1997年のノーベル平和賞を共同受賞しました。故ダイアナ妃と共に地雷禁止国際キャンペーンを全世界が認知するレベルまで高めていたことでも知られています。また、オバマ政権下、米国国務次官補代理として紛争安定化指令室を創設し、3年間運営に当たりました。その間、予測テクノロジーを開発し、政府を離れてから G ストラット社として起業し、2015年からその運営に当たると同時に、バージニア大学で教鞭をとっています。
言い忘れたことがあるので付け加えます。先週の8月31日が英国ダイアナ妃が亡くなったちょうど20年目の記念日だったんですけれども、バッキンガム宮殿でその記念の儀式が行われたんですね。で彼はそれを断って日本に来てくれましたので、大変にありがたい訪問だと思っております。
それでは大変お待たせいたしました。第1部、ジェリー・ホワイト氏によるゲームチェンジング・リーダーシップの講演をお楽しみくださいませ。
So which mic is working? Can you hear me? Thank you very much for having me this evening. I'm really proud to be here and to be back in Japan. And I want to thank Ashoka for this wonderful hospitality and opportunity to tell you some stories and to share some things I've learned in my long life. I also want to thank in advance the translators because some of the concepts that we will be dealing with, whether they be resilience or game-changing social entrepreneurship, or even the word strategy. Some of these things are concepts that don't easily translate across culture and language. So we'll try to go slower than usual. I have some slides that I won't do all of them, but we'll try to move through quickly some of the materials. So thank you for your patience, and thank you in advance to the translators. You heard that about being a senior Ashoka Fellow, that it's something that is quite particular in the world. And there are, as you heard from Nana, like over 3,000. I think senior means I've actually got gray hair, or I'm losing my hair, or something else. So it will sound like I'm being terribly American and maybe overconfident or immodest, but I didn't choose the title of an Ashoka social entrepreneur. But I realized that I've spent my life trying to serve other people. So I'm not ashamed to say it's not about Gary White. It's about what we leave behind in the meaning of our work together. No one person leads alone, I believe. So you see some of my background here. You can see a pattern, perhaps, of working on nuclear arms control, working to protect the rights of people with disabilities, etc. And I think the themes are my concern for vulnerable populations, dignity and human rights for all, but also trying to do something that other people perhaps are not doing. That's why we call it game-changing leadership. It's not just an innovation or an improvement or better management style. It's actually changing the rules, the laws, the policies, and the mindsets of people on any one of these issues. So we'll hear more about my experience in the Landmine campaign and my work with survivors. And then we'll get to this last bit of what am I doing now? Starting a tech company, a platform to share how to game out strategy, which means how to use computers to simulate outcomes and make predictions. That can be something as complicated as your region here, nuclear deterrence, and how to see what are the risks, really, of a nuclear conflict on the Korean Peninsula. It also could apply to water negotiations, which we've been asked to do for a client, between Palestinians and Israelis. Or healthcare back in America. So this technology is just a tool to support making better, faster, smarter decisions with higher accuracy. But first, let's talk about, 30 years ago plus. Let's go back to 1984, when I was a 20-year-old student. And I had a victim experience. There I was, traveling as a university student to Israel to study in Jerusalem. And I was born Christian and thought this would be so exciting to go to the Bible land. Better? Sorry about that. So I traveled to Israel, and I thought, I will walk in the footsteps of the prophets. But actually, no one told me how dangerous it was, because Israel has nearly 1 million landmines buried underground. So the Holy Land can be a deadly land. Little did I know that actually there were 80 million landmines buried in over 80 countries. And over 80% of the victims were civilians, not soldiers, not military. I didn't know any of this when I went camping on a vacation in the spring of 1984 with 2 of my best friends. So there I was, just hiking on a beautiful sunny day, and suddenly, boom! What just happened? I was flipped in the air, I land on my face. I still don't think about landmines. I think it's a terrorist attack. We're being shot at. We're about to die. But it was quiet. There was no other explosion. And my 2 friends yelled at me not to move, because they began to realize we were in a minefield, and that any move could be our last. Because if there's one, there are many. So they turn me over, and I look down and say, where is my foot? Where is my foot? I have no foot. Where's my foot? You can feel the trauma is trying to communicate, and your brain can't handle it. But that's what landmines do. They're meant to rip off a body part, to maim you, not to kill you, to terrorize you. So that was a victim experience when I was 20 years old, an innocent pilgrim or traveler in Israel. It led me years later to start a small organization called Landmine Survivors Network, actually in 1995. And this was to put a human face and to empower the voice of survivors. And I had the privilege of learning from survivors all around the world the power of resilience, how to overcome when the worst thing happens: war, disaster, disease. So from Bosnia to Jordan to Cambodia to Vietnam to El Salvador, you get the picture. I went, I listened, and I learned about trauma. Not just my own, but war trauma, the worst you can imagine. And that brought me to working with, as you heard, the late Princess of Wales, who seemed to have a deep understanding of trauma. Why? We'll get to that. So what's the sign that we see victims who don't recover? You see them get stuck in the past, self-pity. pitying, blaming and resenting, and actually taking. For example, if I asked each of you, could you give me $1 million because I lost my leg? Even if you gave me $1 million and I was in the mentality of a victim, nothing, of course, can grow my leg back. No amount of giving, but I may want to take from you. Victims blame, they even resent their friends or family members who have success. So I ask ourselves to listen to the voice of a victim when it starts to show these hallmarks, even in our leaders. When they play off victimhood and create fear and division, blame, resentment. So what did survivors teach? How do you move from a victim to a survivor, let alone a leader or a thriver? And so this recipe of resilience started to show up in our programs to help the victims get legs, get jobs, and get on with their lives. Number one, the first step to survivorship, or the first step for resilience, is to face facts, no matter how awful. So for me, my leg's not growing back. I'm not a starfish. Fact. My hair's not growing back. Fact. The globe is warming. Fact. Donald Trump is my president. Fact. It's best to face the facts. What is. What was. And I would say that emotions are facts as well. What you feel about them is worth facing. I don't like the feeling of losing my leg. They say losing a limb is like losing your spouse or a loved one. Your personal piece of you has been chopped, and you have phantom pain. You miss it. You're sad. Okay, we face facts. Number two, choose life. What does that mean? Well, we assume life's better than death, and we want to have hope that this awful experience won't forever define us as a victim. Choose life, not death, each day. Have hope for the future, something bigger than what hurts you. Okay, number three, we face facts, we chose life, we want to live, but no one survives alone. No one succeeds alone either. And isolation will kill you. So when people are in pain, they tend to withdraw into their shell, like a turtle. But reaching out means resisting that temptation. Even in Japan, I hear stories. And back in America, when teenagers are hurt, depressed, even on social media, they then withdraw. And they're lonely, and suicide rates are going up. I think more for boys in Japan, and actually, interestingly, more for girls in the United States. So that's an awful fact. We don't want that to stay the same. So we need to teach people to reach out even when the temptation is they are too proud, because no one survives alone. Number 4, survivors teach us that you got to get moving. No one lives your life for you. And I remember when I was in the hospital, after I think about 3 weeks, they were finally teaching me how to get out of bed and into a wheelchair after losing blood and surgeries. I was in a lot of pain and weak. So I get in this wheelchair with the help of a nurse. That was a lot. But I had to get to the cafeteria to go eat in the hospital. No more room service for Jerry White. And the nurse looked down on me, and she laughed. She said, "Jerry, if you want to move, push, push, roll." So I don't know, the universe gave me some things to deal with. One of them was this. The universe gives many of you. How many of you have had a year, a before and after moment, an anniversary, or a date when life was never the same? A diagnosis. It's the human condition. You don't get out without some scar tissue. But the good news is we can be resilient. We can overcome. That's what's so inspiring about human nature. So let's say we get moving. I'm doing my rehab. What was the special ingredient, the special sauce for survivors who were smiling? Like they didn't get the memo, like you're missing your legs, your house was burned down, and your father was shot in front of you in Bosnia. How can they continue? So we don't judge or blame victims, because life is very hard for very many people. But we do pay attention when there's a super survivor in the room, when someone is overcoming and they seem to have energy, joy. And it's because they're givers. In small and big ways, they learn to give back. Or like the American movie, Pay It Forward. Make life about more than yourself. And altruism, giving, is necessary for the human condition to thrive. Food, sex, sleep, giving. That's how your serotonin and health goes up. Your brain reacts chemically to giving, to serving, to helping. So that's the secret. You now have the recipe. So what does that mean to move from victim to survivor and now to leader? What are the hallmarks of resilient leaders, game-changing leaders? They have these characteristics. They got in shape for resilience. So the studies at Yale University and Mount Sinai School of Medicine, some of the best scholars and researchers in the world, broke it down for us. 10 characteristics. Optimism, altruism, as I just said, giving, moral compass, faith and spirituality. They aren't saying a religion, but belief perhaps in something bigger than yourself. Humor, one of the #1 characteristics of resilience. And one of the reasons, I don't know Donald Trump, but I am concerned that people who do say, it's not a great sense of humor. Social support. facing your fears, the fact your emotion, having a mission, and training. So what do you notice about these 10 characteristics? They're things you are not born with. Most. You could say you are optimistic. These are things you get in shape for. You do, you choose. You go to the gym of resilience and you prepare. Or life will teach you to do it. Life is a gym. But that's the good news, that we aren't going to just die together in depression. We have choices. So if you make these choices from the scholarship and the lessons of survivors, we move towards leadership and the hallmarks. So up in the right-hand corner, these are big words. I don't know if they're so easy, but courage. This means you have heart. And you can give heart to people by encouraging them. Humor, covered that. Humility. Sort of interesting, like I find that Americans don't come across, nor do I, as humble. The Japanese, more on the surface, do. Modest. You would never speak this way. But what is humility? I think it's like math. It's truth. We're human. We're frail. We need each other. Sometimes it can wear a suit. Sometimes it shows up in rags. Perseverance. Stick with it, right? Do your sit-ups, your push-ups, your rehab. It's yours. And back to generosity, you see the pattern. These 5 hallmarks are sort of the mirror opposite of these 5 hallmarks of being a victim and getting stuck in the past. Again, not judging, but hoping that victims can make choices to be in the present and move forward. So when I'm talking to students here or back at the University of Virginia, or even my 4 rascal children who are 20 to 27, I'm looking for leaders. It doesn't mean super leaders, it means the research at Harvard on immunity to change talks about workers who need to understand themselves and the world much better, with mental complexity. So when leaders break it down, yes, no, black, white, good group, bad group, that's not so complex. But you all, we all, need to change a mindset, because adaptive challenges is the phrase they use. A complex world requires an adaptive and resilient mind dealing with complexity and uncertainty. And this last one I underlined, the biggest error leaders make is when they apply technical means, tools and things, to solve adaptive challenges that won't be solved by a technique, a tool, a training, a thing. And this is when I speak as an American, think sort of bigger. Afghanistan, Iraq, complex. But the US has an amazing tool called the military-industrial complex. One of the strongest muscles in the world. We've been exercising it. how's that going for us? Applying a technique, a tool, a military, building more weapons is much easier. And then trying to apply those bombs to the symptoms of conflict. No wonder we're a mess. 16 years in Afghanistan, $1 trillion down. Millions of lives, thousands of Americans dead. Because more bombs or soldiers, military will solve this problem, an adaptive one? What about North Korea? It's a rather complex story. And saying my nuclear weapon is bigger than your nuclear weapon is not the conversation. So we want our youth, ourselves, to start to think on different levels. When are we just using tools? I'm all for a good military. I can even be proud of American prowess or strength. But applied to the wrong context, it's a disaster. Even a military general who was the US President, Eisenhower, made the point. Plans are worthless. Planning is everything. It's that, in English, the ING, the process of being adaptive. A plan is a thing, a tool, a technique. A strategy, which we'll now talk about, is more than a plan. So at Oxford, there's Lawrence Friedman, who's written a book on strategy called Strategy, A History. And it covers 800 pages in history, from ancient stories to literature to modern day civil rights movements to war. And what I love, actually, and struck me, was his summary phrase: strategy is the art of creating power. One more time. Art. Creation. Wait a minute. Game-changing leadership is more artistic than managerial. It's creative. Social entrepreneurship. Ashoka is looking for creativity in game-changing. Social entrepreneurs are like social artists, painting change. Of course, there's lying and cheating and power and military and violence and coercion. That's history. But back at the ranch, back in the United States, we have tried to evolve the definition of strategy to be more affirmative. Almost like a wiki strategy definition with our students. Strategy is the art with science. Let's not belittle science. It's the combo of creating power to achieve lasting systemic change. So these are big words: systemic, sustainable, blah, blah. But it's just not an improvement. And it's creative, adaptive, dynamic, etc. It's alive. And also requires you to make tough choices. What not to do. Even in business school, I was talking to someone, that's one of the biggest lessons. What are you going to do? And what are you not going to do? A comprehensive plan is not a strategy. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are not strategies. But the word has been so overused, strategic plans, strategic goals, strategic objectives, that we've numbed ourselves to forget it's a critical art. So this is what we teach as sort of a model, and again, it's just from my experience as a leader of some strategies in the world, is first you need an affirmative vision, something bigger than all of us. Then you make the tough choices. You then have to align. We'll talk about that right now. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Today we only have some time to look at vision and alignment right now, but ultimately, these are sort of 6 elements that go into creative strategy and game-changing leadership as we see it. Next. So affirmative vision for strategy. Icons. What's the role of icons? Why Princess Diana? What's wisdom? How can you teach 20-year-olds in college wisdom, strategy, leadership? They're so young. You have to start practicing early. No time like the present. If I didn't put Mandela's name, the question is, here's an icon, one of the greatest political icons of the last century, South Africa. In Hiroshima, when I addressed a few of the students, I realized in the middle of the talk that people didn't know who Mandela was. Or even if they did, what's the issue of South Africa and apartheid? He's a hero. Maybe we should know him. Next. And then I thought, well, do they know Gandhi? So I found that maybe I'm using international icons that many in Japan, but maybe also Kansas, or in more rural areas of the United States, are not listening to or know about. We assume Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, we name the bigs in the West, or So the question would go back to you in Japan. Who are your icons? Or in Hiroshima, who are yours? Another one. Another Western white male, a pope. And I'm like, I don't care if you're Catholic, but a pope for the Catholic Church, that's 1.2 billion Christians, Catholics. There's 2 billion Christians, but 1.2 billion Catholics across the world. That's power. That's bigger than the United States and Japan and a few other countries combined. So before we put down religion, think, how is an icon like Pope Francis actually pulling an icon like Saint Francis? So of course, no one in most of my art, Saint Francis who? A 13th century saint who was known for poverty, humility, peace, and the environment. In one day, becoming Pope, this Argentine priest invokes the name, an icon, Saint Francis. Boom. He shifts the conversation of the Catholic Church from sexual abuse and disaster and corruption. That's game-changing leadership. And I think Harvard Business School should write a case study on how one uses icons and what did Pope Francis do? How did he do that? Change the whole strategic narrative in less than a year. And here's a royal icon. But again, I don't know. Does anyone really know who Princess Diana is? Of the next generation? And Prince Harry maybe, Prince William maybe. I'm not an icon, but I used to have more hair. Ken Rutherford is my partner, and he lost both his legs in Somalia, not as a soldier, but as a humanitarian. And the two boys are Prince William and Prince Harry's age. But this was 12 and 14 when we introduced them to Princess Diana in Bosnia. So how did Diana do it? In Bosnia on this trip, we visited survivors, and after a particularly tough, sad visit of a widow whose husband, after the war, had gone fishing and reeled in a landmine that exploded and killed him. So after that visit, Diana's rather quiet, highly emotional story had happened a month earlier, 2 months earlier. And she says, you know, every survivor you introduce me to tells me their date. April 12th, 1984. Ken chimes in, December 16th, 1993. And then Diana thinks and says, you know what? I think my date is July 29th, 1981. The day she married Prince Charles. For her, that was the before and after moment when life would never be the same. Was she a psychologist? No. Did she have trauma intelligence? Yes. I can't remember, were we going to show a clip of video? Or what's the next? So let's, one more slide about royal icons. There's the boy, Prince Harry. And the same guys on the log. I have more hair than Jarko. He's now 33. Malach. So Prince Harry had his date 20 years ago. The before and after moment of losing a mother when you're 12. And he suppressed it. And he confessed only this year that he went into therapy for 3 years because he had not faced facts. He felt he was messing up his life. He needed to reach out and get moving to get healthy and give back. He's taking up his mother's causes, her unfinished business of a landmine-free 2025. He also is taking on HIV and AIDS. And Prince William is taking on cancer and homelessness. Proud to give and to continue to give as their iconic role model, mother, did. So let's take a break from my voice and just hear and see what was Diana doing and why does an icon matter?
In history, royal people went around planting commemorative trees or launching ships or things like that. But the princess has taken up the cause of the deaf, of handicapped children, and that perhaps is something new to many people, that royal people should concern themselves in this way.
Diana did become very ripped very quickly by causes. She always said to me that she thought of herself as an outsider, that these people were also outsiders, and she had a bond with them. the idea that Diana was an outsider is, for me, quite hard to reconcile because she was everything that is the establishment in some ways. But emotionally, she felt that she was an outsider. And that's what attracted her to a range of organisations where people were on the wrong side, as it were.
She resonated with suffering. She herself had scar tissue and traumas growing up. She was introverted and lonely, had insecurities. It's the accumulation of this, even after marrying the prince and becoming Princess Diana. All of that was combining into something quite powerful, which was this very raw, high emotional intelligence, social intelligence. I would call it trauma intelligence.
There's one more about her involvement on landmines that we were going to show, so if you have do a couple more minutes on her role in landmines.
I hated to be in her position. Every single thing that she did was, followed and documented, and, she was never kind of out of the spotlight. But I also saw the way that she used it.
The thing is, Ross, I have all this media interest, so let's take it somewhere where they can be positive and raise a situation which is distressing like this.
I went there thinking it's not going to be a serious trip, and actually the trip turned out to be really quite different. Because of what I do, I was kind of used to seeing things like that, but even so, it was shocking.
So she lost insurance.
She could smell in a room and feel who was suffering most, who was most depressed or suicidal, who was most injured. And she attracted like a magnet those people to her.
Don't her friends help her?
Those of us who worked with the princess in 1997 had the privilege of seeing her at her best. This is her calling the shot, to coming into her power and exercising it.
She did this famous walk through the minefield, which, we were all kind of, was she really going to do it? And she was walking through along this path, but there were mines either side, and at the end of it, some of the journalists, joking, was saying to her, we didn't get good pictures, do it again. And she did. I thought, it's nerve-wracking to walk through a minefield, so to do it for a second time. But she knew what those pictures would mean. Some people didn't like it. There was criticism of her by some government ministers.
Well, the government minister at home has said you will lose the cabinet by supporting this campaign. Do you have your reaction to that? Yeah, I'm really trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world. That's all. Oh, my really ready to burst into tears. Who said I'm a loose cannon?
She wanted to bring attention, and there's not much the government could do about it. She commanded way more attention than any government minister in Britain.
I had the privilege of working with leaders all around the world. I've never experienced this charismatic light energetically coming off of someone and actually changing things. When we moved to negotiate the Landmine ban treaty, the media was on the issue, and it helped us make sure that the treaty included provisions for the victims. It was the first arms control treaty to have humanitarian provisions. That's because of the Princess of Wales.
And in that way, she did presage, to some degree, people like George Clooney, Angelina Jolie, maybe even Bono, showing you how you could take that celebrity, and so long as you knew where the cameras were and knew how to focus attention and knew what you were talking about, you could do good.
So you see why we miss her. The question is, who are your icons? And how do you align wisdom, understanding, and knowledge? How will you or students in Japan become a mini Della, not the Mandela, a micro Della, anyone? Small practice. And we see in literature, ancient and wisdom literature, that when there's an anointed leader, a leader of a change maker, the three words show up in different ways. Wisdom, understanding, knowledge. Aligning who you are with how you see patterns that need change, and then what you do with excellence. But again, if you take knowledge on its own, technical solutions, as we discussed, military, without an understanding of the underlying conflict, or the wisdom of how to proceed with values that go beyond yourself or national interest, one thing without the other two can do harm. Two can do harm. So the leaders who are game changers, or King Solomon, they said, was the wisest of all. People went to him for wisdom and his understanding and his knowledge. So let's try and exercise. I'd say take out your pens in your mind. So, who's your icon? Is it too Western to say who's your role model? A teacher, a boss, a person of history, a manga or cartoon character, Wonder Woman? I don't care. So take a moment right now and just write down like who, and the only rule is you can't be a family member. You can't say, oh, my grandma, my favorite aunt. That's too close, too easy. So just think, who's a role model, someone you look up to and admire?
もし紙がない方は近くのスタッフが紙とペンを持っておりますので挙手をお願いいたします。紙とペンが必要な方はいらっしゃいませんでしょうか。お近くのスタッフまでお声かけください。
And then if you have someone in mind, doesn't have to be a perfect answer, ask yourself, what are the three finest qualities or things you admire most about your hero, icon, role model? So imagine the person, you're going to lunch with this person, and you feel the energy, your excitement. Think about what are the nouns, not, oh, they're smart, or good looking, or hardworking. That's too small. What are the nouns, the qualities? Justice, peace, courage, the qualities of leadership, but your own favorite 3. You might imagine when I was in Hiroshima with some students, and if you do this in the United States, and ask who's the game changers, and everyone raises their hand. 90% of the students, as we said. And then students here, 10%. When this vocabulary came at some Japanese youth in Hiroshima, it was, what's a role model? And what if you don't have one? Or can you have more than one? I said, sure, I have 20. I have many. Then you ask for volunteers. Like, who here wants to tell us their role model, their hero, their icon? Frozen. No one was going to step up. No volunteers. When I'm a professor at University of Virginia, I can say, you, get up here. But there was terror in the room. So I won't make anyone come up here, but the point of this is to actually get at your wisdom, yours. So let's say one of my heroes is, if you take like Buddha and Jesus and His Majesty King Hussein from Jordan. So the question, and what 3 qualities, what do you imagine that you love about them, Jerry? It takes me a while too. I was, I don't know, there's something like light. Buddha, enlightenment, light, Jesus, light. I like the word light. Freedom, they were like, we have free Tibet, free the Holy Land, free liberation. My second word, liberation, freedom. And the third, what is healing, shalom, fullness, wholeness. Poor translators, I didn't tell them, I think these are his new vocabulary, they're probably frustrated. And then you make the students say, well, you try that, Jerry. Those are you. Those are your 3 words. You didn't meet Jesus. You didn't meet Buddha. I did meet King Hussein. So can I say, I am light as my leadership DNA? Or in your words, can you own it? I am. Not I want to be someday, hopefully, because I'm modest. That might be the first Japanese response, I don't know. Humble. So then say, I am humility. Are you? So if I say, I am light, I am liberation, I am wholeness. You can chop off all my limbs and I don't allow you to make me less than a whole person. So what we're doing here and with students is just trick them to think and play a projection game. They're putting your 3 words for Buddha might be different than mine because they're coming from you. So you want to say, these aren't things you own, these are values and energies that are part of your game-changing leadership ability. The highest sort of soul or the best qualities that are in you to bring to your office, to bring to your house, to bring to the street. And when you're not doing that, you're not being you. So wisdom is that first step. So we're going to wrap up and shift to the next part of the session, but I wanted to start to pull. So you see the challenge culturally. When I try to pull, it sounds like immodesty. And I'm saying, no, you are not human. You don't own humility. You don't own light. But it's in you, so bring it to the game. Bring it to your office. So the next exercise you do very quickly is, okay, we've got some wisdom. What's your understanding? How do we figure that out? What, in America, I'd use a different language. What pisses you off? What makes you angry when you read the newspapers? Here, that's a bit much. So even what makes you burn for humanity, for justice? Where's your passion? Again, strong language coming from my culture. But the question is, there must be something. Even if you don't use angry terms. What do you think of it? What would you like to change? The environment, corruption, bullies, sexism, discrimination, dishonesty? Like, what qualities make you burn? And then, do you have courage to take a stand? It doesn't have to be, I'm doing a march in my office. It means, do you take a stand quietly for who you are and what you care about in the appropriate terms and culture and context where you live? And lastly, knowledge. I think this is the easy part. What are you good at? What do you contribute day to day at work or at home with excellence? Your know-how. Again, back to your techniques, your tools. Or let's say you're just a good writer, a great journalist. Like for me, my joke is like, you wouldn't guess this about me, and I'm going to be immodest. You ready? If I were you, I would hire me to dance at your wedding. Because I'm an amazing dancer. And people don't see it coming. The one-legged big oaf. No, there are videotapes of me embarrassing my children at weddings all over the United States. So it just means you trick people, like, don't take your immodesty so seriously. What are you good at? That's math. That's a fact. It's not about you boasting. Know what you're good at. Contribute it with excellence. Apply it with understanding. And live it with wisdom that you don't own, but is available. So we'll wrap up there, because I think there are other things we can talk about with dialogue and questions and answers, including some of the things I learned and experienced while serving with President Obama and Secretary Clinton about trying to make change happen in one of the biggest, most obese governments and bureaucracies in the world. It's not easy to move a big government or a big company. But I would challenge you to say, you don't need to move everything. What if you only need about a 10% change? Imagine if America was 10% more modest and humble. And imagine if Japan was 10% more like internationally confident and like asserting. That's amazing. I think we changed the world together. And that's what I'd like to see happen in small and big ways. And I want to again thank Ashoka and thank all of you for listening to my stories today. Are we running a little late? Are we okay without a break? By all means, if people need to get some air, but I think if we want to press on, Hiro, is that okay for us to continue? Or you all, I'm sorry if we ran a little over, started a little late.
では引き続き第2部に移らせていただきますが、少々壇上のセッティングをしますので、その間に本日の対談者である柳瀬博一氏のご説明をさせていただきたいと思います。柳瀬博一氏は現在日経ビジネスオンラインにてプロデューサーとしてご活躍されています。慶應義塾大学経済学部卒業後、日経マクローヒル社、現在の日経 BP 社に入社されました。雑誌日経ビジネスの記者、専門誌の編集や新媒体開発などに携わった後、出版局にて多数の本の編集を担当されています。またラジオのパーソナリティを務め、2008年より日経ビジネスオンラインのプロデューサー、2012年より日経ビジネスオンライン双方のメディアを担当するチーフ企画プロデューサーとしてご活躍されていらっしゃいます。それではただいまより第2部ジェリー・ホワイト氏と柳瀬博一氏による対談を始めさせていただきます。それでは壇上にお上がりくださいませ。
では小谷さん、早速いろいろ質問をしていきたいと思います。謙虚な日本人の一人として、勇気を振ってですね、1割の謙虚じゃないですね、私の時言いますね、私の時はですね、この、質問者になれと言われたのはほんの2週間前なんですね。何も知らない偉い人に対してですね、ずけずけと質問するのが私の唯一の特技でございますので、その特技を生かして今日はホワイトさんにいろいろ話を聞いていきたいと思います。で、まずですね、最初に聞きたいのはね、ホワイトさんのヒーローは誰ですか
？Retranslate?
Okay. もう一度聞いた方がいいのかな？はい。
So I think you saw most of them. There's Diana, there's Mandela, there's St. Francis, there's literature, So in my case, I have had many heroes, even His Majesty King Hussein. Kofi Annan, I thought was, so there's interesting leaders. My heroes also tend toward spiritual leaders like Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus. What are they doing? Thich Nhat Hanh. I think they are spiritual game changers. It's a mystery. So I'm not wise enough to understand, but I'm trying to learn from their wisdom. Who's your hero? Hero.
はい。ありがとうございます。で、今名前が出た人は非常にビッグネームですよね。例えばですね、日本人はおそらくですね、さっきホワイトさんの話にもありましたけど、尊敬する人っていうとお父さんお母さんっていう方すごく多いと思うんです。で、お父さんお母さん以上のヒーローや尊敬する人、考えさせる機会あんまりなかったと思うんですけど、そういう考えというのはホワイトさんいつアメリカ人というのは教わるんでしょうか？
I think in America, since we live in fantasy land sometimes, we put on capes. And you have all those heroes that came after the war: Superman, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman. So we comic books that are about heroes, two-dimensional ones. And then yes, you learn in the history books about those who made history. Some awful, some good. So I find it interesting. That's why in the game you can't pick a family member. It's too close. You have to project outward to then come back. But yes, in America, I think it's in the culture. And then even with my students, they're all told, like I was at college, you are a leader. You're going to college. If you go to, it would be Tokyo University, the first day. In America, they would say, you're a leader, you're one of the best. You will run the world one day. Not just like that, but it's implied. You have a responsibility to lead, and responsibility is coming your way if you get a top education. So again, I look at Japan and say, how does that show up in Japan? Is there an invitation to lead, or are you all just the same?
少なくとも多分ですね、ホワイトさん僕同い年なんですね。僕が大学生になった時は同じためなんですね。ための私からすると大学に入った時そういう話を僕慶応大学だったされたことないですね。なんとなく、ちゃんとしたサラリーマンになりなさいという感じで現在に至るちゃんとしたサラリーマンここに座ってないかもしれないですけれども、そう言われて育ってる人が案外多いんじゃないかなと思います。
But not like what is the phrase? So what's your hope? What's your dream?
それをね逆にね、聞きたかった話なんですけど、私たちの夢はですね、いい大学に出ていい会社に入ってですね、そこそこのお家を買ってですね、その前に家族を作ってですね、つつがなく定年退職をするのがジャパニーズドリームだと思われていた時代がかつてありました。で、今多分ですね、それが大きくチェンジしようとしています。企業がずっとあって、で、今そこにある危機、具体的に言うと隣の国が、核爆弾をどうやら持ち始めてるだとか、少子高齢化で、経済の先行きが危ういぞと言われたときに、おそらく今日のジェリー・ホワイトさんのようなお話を聞かざるを得ないと思ってこんなに、老若男女とは言いませんけど、結構幅の広い人たちが聞きに来てると思うんですね。
So if you have a crisis and a turning point, where do you turn? Who do you turn to? I'm not Japanese, I can't tell you.
そうで、そこで今日の話で僕が聞きたいことがあります。はい。で、ジェリーさんは地雷で足を失われました。もし地雷で足を失われてなかったら、今この場所で、座ってらっしゃる仕事、政府に入って、例えばまさにこの世界を変える、より良くしようとする仕事に自分をついていたと思いますか？どうでしょう？
It's a good question. What I see from other survivors and myself is that trauma reveals. Trauma makes you more yourself, not less. So if you are having deep difficulty, you had deep difficulty before. The crisis reveals the character. Slip into victimhood or overcome and try to show resilience. So for me, I sort of always cared about the world. I felt that, in fact, I was a global citizen before being an American. I wasn't America first, Tokyo first, Washington first. I was humankind first. Children of the universe, of God, of light first. That we are all worthy of dignity, respect, and rights, equally. I was raised that way. And then social justice. I was born with privilege. Give back. So I was raised at an early age to think that, do that. And in America, you are encouraged, and it's almost a state religion, there's a national pastime, to volunteer, to do extracurricular work. And in fact, you don't get into a college just because of your good grades, your knowledge. You showed leadership. So before I stepped on a landmine at age 20, the formative years were done. I wanted to be a journalist or a diplomat or something. I didn't know what it meant. Lawyer, government, business. My family and my father was a businessman. So I think losing my leg put me on a faster track to wake up, not assume that I had a long life, not take the years for granted, and get busy on steroids, living the life I wanted to lead on things I cared about.
ありがとうございます。すごく皆さんにも参考になった話だと思うんですけど、先ほどビデオに出てきましたダイアナ妃。ダイアナ妃の話を、ビデオで見て、非常に僕がキーワードとしてびっくりしたのは、彼女が自分をアウトサイダー、部外者だと思っていた。で、アウトサイダーであるということが、いかに彼女にとって重要だったのか、先ほどビデオでも片鱗が伺えたんですけど、改めて、アウトサイダーというのがまさに先ほどのトラウマと関わってくる部分だと思うんですけど、アウトサイダーだからこそできること、これ何なのかちょっとぜひジェリーさんから改めて説明をいただきたいんですが。
She was, as we also heard, an insider, part of the establishment, family, then royal. But she was wounded. She felt different. I think every teenager, maybe all of us, at some point feel like an outsider. No one understands us. Our parents don't understand us. My boss doesn't understand me. So there's that, and then the teenagers who are so lonely and hurting and depressed because they don't know they do belong. They feel outside, or they failed and went to their room. They retreated, like we said. So she had both. I think I have both. I'm an insider, outsider. I'm obviously American. I actually don't feel American. Weird. I grew up with privilege and power. White, male, educated, affluent family. But I cared more about the poor, like those who don't have. So you can, I think, being insider, outsider can be an advantage, but I'd be surprised if I interviewed each and every one of you that you wouldn't have descriptions of yourself as outsider, insider, or times you felt marginalized, whether as a woman at work or politics, or as a guy trying to keep the job. So, and failure makes you feel different. Scar tissue looks weak at first. Poor Jerry. It's hard to feel sorry for Diana, right? Except when you see the rest of the documentary and say she married into a situation that was impossible, and the world watched every David, or paint. And so we all, many of us identified and projected onto her, feeling like an outsider, or scorned, or someone who betrayed you, or a marriage that didn't work. That's why it's human. She's an icon because we project our own outsiderness feeling onto her. And the world did that. Billions watched and cared about why. Princess. So, how do we play insider, outsider?
日本人は先ほど僕は会社を、大学卒業したらサラリーマンになる。これ多分日本におけるいわゆる割とマジョリティの生き方だった。で言ってしまうとみんながインサイダーになるのが正しい道で、アウトサイダーになるということをすごく恐れていた時代が長かったんですね。でそういった時にダイアナ妃のようなある種究極のインサイダーでありながら、ある種究極のアウトサイダーになった時に、そのアウトサイダーである自分をうまく生かして、世界をより良くしようという道を選ぶ。これ非常に困難で、ややもすると日本人が割と苦手な道筋のような気がするんですね。でも今日本というのは必ずしもかつてのようにサラリーマンになれば一生安泰という時代がなくなった時に、日本人のような大きな組織に、よらば対峙するのが、どちらかというと習い性だった人たちがですね、部外者でありながら、社会とつながって、そして何かをチェンジする。これどういうふうにしたらそのマインドセットを変えることができるとお思いになりますか？
Well, as you just described, I won't do it. Circumstances will. The world is changing faster. The jobs are trickier. Danger and conflicts rising. Demographics aging. So you face crisis, so you have a before and after transition. Stay victim, deny, don't face facts, pretend, or start to make some choices about what life looks like for you, your family, your meaningful work. So, one question is like, how's it working for you? Are you happy? You find purpose? And yes, I don't belittle the fundamental survival of a wage, a job that also gives you belonging and self-esteem or group esteem. So that's not like, why do people want tenure at a university? Why do they work for a government or someone in the family? In developing countries and the United States, there's security, safety, avoiding of risk. Fear. So the only thing I would say is but it's, again, I say this to my children and my colleagues, and it might be strange in Japan. Never make a life decision based on fear or money. I say that out loud. You do have fear, and money is part of fear, security. But when making a life decision, put that in a lockbox or closet over here, done, turn the key. Now have a conversation of who you are, how you see the world, and what you think you can contribute. We'll get back to the money, the math, and the fear. Do that, then go back, open the closet, say, hello, fear, hello, money. We need to negotiate. Because I don't want to sacrifice the bigger treasure of who I am here on the planet today. That makes me happier. So these are different conversations, a wisdom conversation, an understanding conversation, and a knowledge one. But to be driven by the bottom up from fear and insecurity and aversion to risk first. I understand it when security concerns are there, but it's not the full story, so I would just invite anyone, whether one of my students, my children, or in a conversation with a dear friend or colleague, let's look at this differently, and we'll come back to your need for money and food. That's all, we all need that. But last time I checked, Japan has a lot of money and food. Like the inequality, compared to most countries around the world, so wow, you're one of the most secure, one of the most affluent. Not even with the inequalities and the discrimination or the divisions and diversity we have in the United States. So if Japan can't take a risk when you're on paper, one of the most secure, who can?
ということで皆さんお金をちょっと金庫に入れてですね、リスクを取れということですが、はい、ちょっと話を全然変えたいと思います。ジェリーさんはオバマ政権下に米国国務次官を代理としてですね、政府の中でお仕事されていました。一体米国政府でお仕事するってどんなことなのかちょっと聞いてみたいと思います。どんなきっかけでオバマ政権の政府の中に入ったんですか？
So I had taken a risk and left the country. I was living in Malta, the Mediterranean, that's Malta, in the middle of the Mediterranean. And I went to study in a midlife crisis at Cambridge in the UK. I was so happy. I don't think I was skipping, as an adult, taking classes again. And my kids were older and in college, they didn't need the presents the same. And I get a phone call that that someone wanted me to serve. And they were asking me to consider a job that was being created that never existed. So I thought, wow. I called a friend and said, is this a good job or a bad job? To pack up Cambridge, take off my robe and go back to Washington? No. I escaped already. And the person, an ambassador, said to me, your country has asked you to serve. And this was a Republican. He goes, and you like President Obama, right? I said, yeah. And you like Secretary Clinton, correct? Yeah. And your boss, who will be the conflict advisor to Secretary Clinton, has integrity and you respect and know, right? Yes. Many people don't have that opportunity. And this was entrepreneurial for policy and government. It was a new bureau being created by Secretary Clinton called Conflict and Stabilization Operations. So, and I once said, if there were two people, if they ever called me to do something, I would say yes. Because they were so full of integrity, and I had such respect for their leadership, that if they were to ask me for something, reporting for duty. And that's what happened. I packed up, went over, and it was the hardest job for 3 years that I'd ever done, and it nearly broke me. If you put a giraffe in a cage, and it has to ask permission to roam, and the ceiling is only 5 feet high, that's what it felt like. After 3 years, I was like, a social entrepreneur. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but that, like a weird animal at the zoo, Jerry White, was asked to go in a cage and get clearance and permission for most everything that a government needs. please, please, someone let me go. So we pushed and we made some difference, but it wasn't who I am. It wasn't what I was really good at. We did some good things. We made some shifts because we were creating a new bureau of 250 people to work on conflict prevention. That was Hillary Clinton's vision. We did our best and we did some very interesting work. But also when I was inside government, everything got worse around the world. Arab Spring, Putin in Crimea, North Korea, so I thought, I must be cursed. Maybe I should get back out government. And I can have more influence working alongside governments or bringing our capabilities to every government. So I got out, and the giraffe felt that I could start to look around again with vision. I could start to roam without asking permission. Can I go to Japan? Can I have a Japanese relationship? The US government, for security reasons, when you're doing security clearance, I'm not supposed to have a lot of foreign friends. You have to, they ask you about every one of these foreign relationships. So I'd be like, I don't know, they're just Facebook friends. I met them at a conference once. It's, that's not me as a global citizen. So I'm proud of service, deeply concerned about the state of foreign policy, learned a lot, but that means now that I put in the time, I think I can be a better change maker working with governments, civil society, and universities outside government than anything inside.
現在はどんなお仕事ではされてるんでしょうか。
So the company is called Global Impact Strategy. Inside government, we use some methods, theoretical models, and the computer to, we say game out, to simulate on the computer geopolitical events, what's going to happen, and then to create alternative scenarios or games to make a more optimal path happen. And over 3 years, my team of 6 people that I brought into government outperformed 16 intelligence agencies, were 90% accurate on their predictions of geopolitical events, and ranked, this is competitive, in the top 1% of the prediction marketplace inside the US government. There's a competition where thousands of intel and foreign policy analysts, like betting on the stock market, they make geopolitical predictions. And we were ranked in the top. In fact, 3, 1 ranked number 1, number 3, number 7, plus the top team. There's a book on this called Super Forecasting. Super Forecasters. Why? They're curious. They are not subject matter experts, but they're smart. So I thought, what if we can do this inside government, what if we took it outside, democratized, made available to all game theory models? So in the absence of big data, in the absence of perfect information, that's when you need these models to project and analyze the impact of your decisions, strategy, in the face of conflict, uncertainty, hard to capture data. What will Putin do next? What will ISIS do next? Will there be nuclear war in Korea and East Asia? These are big questions where it's a political and human dimension. No amount of big data is going to tell you what happens next in the game. But our software looks like we have cracked a code that's better than what has been available until now. I run this small company, 20 months old, that is making available a cloud-based software platform that takes advantage of subject matter expertise all around the world, aggregates it, because subject matter experts are bad predictors. They know what they know here, vertical and backwards. But all these PhDs and subject matter experts are undervalued around the world and don't talk to each other. So this is a platform that can aggregate subject matter expertise, correct their mistakes, because they're 70% right, but they're 30% wrong on predictions, and spit out the more accurate finding, so that we all could look at that science and challenge the assumptions behind it. So it becomes a global game, not just an insider game for the United States.
という話をお伺いすると、今一番聞きたいのは当然ニュークリアでグローバルゲームというとお隣の北朝鮮の問題があります。小林さんはどのように今の話でいうといくつかのシミュレーションがあると思うんですけど、お考えになっていらっしゃいます。
For a client asked us to start. As you saw in the beginning of my speech, I worked on nuclear non-proliferation for 10 years before taking on landmines. So I know a little bit. But it doesn't matter what Jerry thinks. So we took the software and started in July to populate it with the outcomes on the Korean and East Asia. Nuclear conflict and exchange, the worst disaster this planet would ever have seen. Sort of non-nuclear conflict, status quo, frozen conflict, with heated rhetoric, or back-channel negotiations mitigate conflict, and even so far as Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un striking a deal. So the game, as I'm showing you, is what's the worst case scenario and the best case scenario, and a couple things in between. And then mark the status quo. Frozen conflict, heated rhetoric, but it's getting a little too hot. Like this is, with these leaders, with all due, it's rather terrifying. I came to Japan thinking I would see more fear. And I'm like, oh, you all don't seem that worried. I almost canceled my trip over here. But I'll do anything for Ashoka. And I thought, that's interesting. So the game, probably like you intuitively, the art of what the game, and then you populate preferences of leaders and use the stakeholders, from Trump to the West Wing, sort of Bannon to whomever, to Kim Jong-un to China, Japan, and leaders. So we started to create and build out the basics for a baseline prediction. So this is not to be relied on yet, but it was, my partner says it's sort of reliable, at least in July, the day we did it. The point of a model is to keep it alive and say, well, now Steve Bannon is out, put someone else in, things have changed. So you keep it alive, and you don't just write a report, it's a live simulation. So the good news was that the least preferred, obviously, option was nuclear conflict. And status quo has some power. The default, Trump and Kim Jong-un can't just work alone. They have context, there are countries, there's China. I mean, Pyongyang is a bigger, it's both predictable and unpredictable. So the default, so it looks as if, and when we ran a reliability test, that there was actually like a 65 to 70% reliable prediction that it was on the side of back-channel negotiations, frozen conflict, and even adding some like 30% chance of a Trump move. As you know, he talks to your prime minister directly. He doesn't go, they'll talk 3 times last week. He's one of these guys who just doesn't want to take notes or work the system. He wants to make a deal. Talk to you. Again. So this showed up in the model. So as of, late July, and things are different than late July, but as of late July with some of these contexts, it was looking that the frozen status quo was holding, even with heated rhetoric, hitting a fire pitch that, the model was at least saying nuclear war was not going to happen. But this would be something that was just a first run, but this is what the model would be good for. So I thought, when ripe, we should continue this is one of the biggest issues of our day. That's what we take on. You could do it, the app, like, should I go to business school in Michigan or Stanford or Harvard and game out your optimal path? So there is like a personal application to it. But we built it from our experience in government on conflicts and security. Like, will Iran comply with the nuclear agreement with the Trump administration, even if Trump pulls out? And we model out, so no, Iran's going to comply, and then the circumstances under which it wouldn't comply and go nuclear. So similar, that was a very complex build out we did for a client, but I said go ahead and start to do the Korea case because it's bothering me and all of us quite a bit. It's not going to go away. So that's a long answer to give you a flavor of almost the simplicity of how does one make policy decisions, who are the players, what's their level of influence and their preference, and then using game theory and agent-based modeling, and conjoint analysis and other things, to find your results. Then test it with statistical modeling and other science. So this is now, it's commercially available, but we're just starting, young and starting in our backyard with some of these questions in Washington.
ありがとうございます。で、今回のテーマの一つでもあるのが、まさにホワイトさんがゲームチェンジングができるリーダーになってどうしたらいいのか。で、おそらく今ゲームチェンジをしないといけない一番のシチュエーションが、今挙げた北朝鮮の問題で、というのはここは、今はまさに直接名前が出たのはキムとトランプという、アメリカと北朝鮮のトップですけれども、実はファクターとしては実は我々ほぼ同志日本があります。そしてもちろん韓国があって、そして北朝鮮の向こう側には中国とロシア、それぞれ成り立ちもマインドセットもポリシーも違う複数のプレイヤーがいる。で、おそらくですね、これはいろいろなケースの一つだと思うんですけど、今までホワイトさんが扱ってきた非常に困難な政治問題や現場の例えば本当に戦争や紛争を伴う問題を解決するときに、この何て言うんでしょう、利害の全く異なる、しかも複数の人たち、複数の当事者、国、地域を相手にしてなるべくいいソリューション、まさにソリューションを出さないといけない。こういった時にその当事者の一人として、例えば日本人がどうやって当事者性を担保しながら、なんて言うんでしょう、一番いい答えに行き着くために、今考えて訓練しないといけないことどんなことなのか、これ最後の質問になりますけども、ちょっとぜひ教えてください。
I've had some conversations with Japanese friends who just say, well, the decision of what's going to happen is in America's hands. So again, interestingly, with the trauma of potential nuclear conflict, you pass the buck, not you, but like some Japanese are like, well, it's really up to Trump and Pyongyang. But I'm like, it's up to them whether we all live or die. Like, that's not choosing life, or perhaps facing facts the way we like. So that it is true that so then you can game it, there's different influences. So if you want to change the game and say, I want Japan to have a stronger role in influencing, or even a back channel with China on something, there might be something in the relationships locally that really does have to shift. You can model the scenario. What if it shows up, for example, that Japan does have very little power in this high-stakes game? We've modeled things out where it shows like, no, even on the Arab-Israeli negotiations, we modeled out final status agreements. How would you get to a peace agreement between the Palestinians and Israelis. And you could find pathways and a sequence of negotiation that would optimize your chances of an agreement. But on the question of Jerusalem, they're hard questions, but Jerusalem was unsolvable in the game. It was like, well, then you separate, like, kick Jerusalem down the road, 100 years. So it took creativity, so you thought, and it showed that the United States and John Kerry actually had negative influences on the negotiations. They were the wrong people at the table. If the Americans took sides, or sort of played any favorites or pressured, then the game showed that the Israelis and the Palestinians went to different sides of the road and negotiations broke down. So we were showing that in the game, the United States is not the right person to be negotiating Middle East peace with in the way that we were doing it. It showed it was going to fail. But on Jerusalem, it took the art of strategy. It's like, how do you solve Jerusalem? Like all the players, it doesn't work. And then we brought in the idea of religious actors. Pope Francis. They have real estate in Jerusalem. He has a moral force. Iconic. We hadn't put him in the mix. Put Pope Francis in the game, show his relative influence on Jerusalem, and boom, it showed that he had more influence and could address Netanyahu better than Obama, Putin, and John Kerry combined. That's interesting. We didn't see that coming. Pope Francis, critical to Middle East peace. And then why? Not just because Netanyahu or anyone cared about Catholics or Christian Europe, but Prime Minister Netanyahu cared about the global South, Latin America economics, diplomatic relations, and Pope Francis is from Argentina and was going to visit Israel. A bad visit by Pope Francis to Israel during that year of negotiations would be a disaster for Israel and Netanyahu. So he would make a deal with Pope Francis in a way that he didn't need Putin or others. So it's just an example, when you model these things out, it sometimes surprises you. The US thinks it's so powerful, but it's doing more harm than good in the game. Who is missing? It may be that Japan is critically the one who should be stepping up and in, or not, I don't know. So that's why it's important. When you have multi-stakeholder, multiple players, complex issues, no one of us can keep all the factors and variables in our mind. It's exponential. There's hundreds of thousands of your brain is a supercomputer, but it's not. It's rather, it doesn't, without computers, we cannot see what's going to happen. You cannot track all the variables in a complex negotiation. So we should apply the tools for the purpose of peace. Lastly, I would just say a tool, no matter how great, is not peace. A plan, as we heard, is not a strategy. And wishful thinking, one person, some messiah will make peace with Korea, is also not a strategy. But how do we apply our understanding and the tools and step up? What is an appropriate role for Japan is very important, and what's the appropriate role? And then it might be, that's why one of my friends, who is a negotiation expert, contacted Dennis Rodman and said it's like a crazy thought, like the Pope thought, Dennis Rodman can get to Kim Jong-un. They'll receive him. They talk. It's the weirdest friendship alive. So if you're going to open up a back channel operation, put Dennis Rodman in the game. What happens? So those are the types of things you have to say, like, anyone, Jonathan Powell, there are people who do have relationships, but not tons of people are hanging out or have a deep insight into Pyongyang at the level that's probably needed right now. But there are a few. Put them in the game.
ありがとうございます。
シュートの下手なテニスロッドマンにあまり任せたくないんですけれども、はい。He's not Michael Jordan ね。はい、どうも長時間ありがとうございました。最後にですね、本当に最後の質問。僕、さっきのビデオを見てて、やはりホワイトさんが本当にこの世界平和のために動きたいと思ったきっかけは、僕はやっぱりダイアナさんの笑顔にやられちゃったんじゃないかなと思ってるんですけども。
Yeah, people said I was a very shallow change maker. In other words, I only went after like royal blonde princesses. And then when Diana died, I moved on and Queen Noor of Jordan became our next patron. And they're like, really, Jerry? Just pretty royal women is your strategy? I was like, yes. It's a good one. It's worked so far. But yes, it takes everyone, including all of you, and so I really appreciate the opportunity to share it and to invite, for our students, our children, ourselves, our colleagues, how to maybe just step up 10% and practice our leadership together for the good of not just our families or our business, but for the good of humankind. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。
ジェリー、そして山下さん、ありがとうございました。では、お時間は迫ってまいりますが、最後に会場の皆様から一つ二つだけ質問がある場合は、そのお時間を取らせていただきたいと思います。ご質問ある方、挙手願います。
こちらの方、どうぞ。
はい。マイク回します。
Thank you for your presentation. And I appreciate that there were a lot of words which are very encouraging. I was especially impressed with the words face facts. It's about when you were talking about the people who were hurt, and life is usually some facts are good, but sometimes facts are bad. Well, because life is really so hard. And I personally had a stroke 4 years ago, and then hospitalized for 5 months, and I had to face really bad facts. So my question is, what kind of positive effects does that facing facts have on people?
I could turn the question to, if you don't face facts, what negative effects happen? Denying facts, suppressing, delaying, trauma. So there's sort of one side of the coin is there's a strong negative effect for not facing facts. But it's your choice, and sometimes the facts are so awful. Like I dealt with my leg, but actually it took about 2 years later, I faced the fact of being depressed about my leg. It took me 2 years to feel the loss, not survive the physical pain, and to get back to school and learn to walk and achieve, check. Everyone's proud, and then I was left with a feeling that my leg wasn't growing back, and it was depressing. I missed it. So facts will have a way of, like truth, winning in the end. You'll have to circle back and face facts. And the ones you suppress or deny, they will show themselves again, I feel. So there's an advantage of getting on with it as soon as you can. We're calling a decision. This isn't working. Choose to call a better decision. So that it's the combination. This isn't a line like do step 1, then step 2, step 3. I moved from facing some facts to step 4, get moving. like show that I could play tennis again, I could ski on one leg, everyone's okay, like family, my mom's okay with me losing a leg. So I got moving fast and had to go back to then dealing with some other challenges that were very personal and social. So I mean, a stroke is a fact that is showing itself to you. Again, a tumor is a fact trying to tell you something. It's mysterious. There's not like a solution or like an answer. There's just more questions, like, wow, I didn't know that. What else don't I know about my body trying to tell me to change? Or, and the hardest is, it's not just the stroke, not just the leg. It's every survivor said losing the leg was the easy part. Or dealing with your appointments for the doctor. It was losing your place in society. Losing your job, losing your place, losing your respect, losing your abilities, loss of dignity. Loss. Trauma is loss of control. So you start to face it, you face facts so that you can regain some control over some pieces, while understanding you are not fully in control. That's where the humility and humble and humiliation of life is like, we can't control when disaster strikes.
Thank you very much.
ありがとうございます。では最後にもう1名だけ。
Two last questions.
マイクをお願いします。
Thank you for your presentation. I have a simple question. What is your definition of justice? The reason I'm asking this is because my justice can be against your justice. I feel that there's a lot of things about justice in the world that we can be against. Thank you.
That's not a simple question. I would just say, like the scale. Like basic fairness and balance. Of course it's more, but say, you gave me a simple question, that's my simple answer.
Thank you.
それではこれをもちまして本日の講演会を終了させていただきます。本日は長時間にわたりご清聴いただきまして誠にありがとうございました。本日第1部ジェリー・ホワイト氏の講演のスクリプトは日本語バージョン、英語バージョンともに後日アショカジャパンのホームページで公開いたします。ご興味のございます方はオンラインからダウンロードくださいませ。またご使用になられました同時通訳機器は会場出ていただいてすぐ左手で返却をお願いいたします。またアンケートのご提出のご協力をいただいております。ご記入いただけましたらお帰りの際に受付にご提出くださいませ。本日は本当にご来場ありがとうございました。
どうしようかなって今危機感に。
ありがとうございます。
大丈夫です。
撮ったのかなあ、ちゃんと撮れてるわ。これどうやったらこれかな。